Have fun.
Yeah, you too. Okay, so hello everybody. I'll introduce myself. My name is Andres Richero. I'm based out of Montevideo, Uruguay. That's down south in South America. I'm a UX designer and lead a team of distributed designers, researchers, and recruiters across several countries and continents. And I love being part of ADP List and being here today with you, sharing my experience and the one of my fellow speakers in terms of mental health. Over to you, Robert.
Hello, everybody. Really appreciate you being here with us today. So yes, I'm Rob Cerncy. Hello, another mentor on ADP List. Happy to be joining this panel and you all and talking about our topic today. I am a designer based out of San Francisco. So on to you, Theo.
Hey everybody, I'm Theo Johnson. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm an experienced design user researcher at Microsoft, and I'm here to talk to you guys today about imposter syndrome and depression and anxiety. I'm also a mentor here on ADP List. I love helping you guys, and I'm looking forward to sharing the love. All right, on to you, Joanne.
Yeah, thanks, Theo. Hello, I'm Joanne. I'm a designer based in New York area. I've been doing design for more than like 12 years. That doesn't consider like when I was like creating newsletters in my primary school. Yeah, so today I want to talk about like burnout for mental wellness because last year I was into design leadership training sponsored by Google, and we're particularly talking about like how to maintain a good mental wellness by setting up boundaries and also practice design leadership as well. So I would like to share my experiences, my learnings to more people, so we all can grow together. Yeah, that's it. I think maybe next, Cammi.
Nice. Thank you, Joanne. Welcome, everyone. I am so pleased to hear about so many people learning so many things through the amazing platform of ADP List. I am a recovering graphic designer. I have more than 30 years experience. I just stopped counting at 30. I figure 30 is a good round number. I am an author. My third book is coming out in the next few weeks. I'm a speaker, but most importantly and most passionately, I am a transformational coach, helping people overcome their inner critic and getting down to what people are really, what they're made of, what makes them happy, what brings them joy, and what's standing in the way. Today, I'm very passionate about this subject, obviously, and our panelists are going to be amazing. I can't wait for all of us to share all of our stories. So let's dive in. I think everybody's ready. Everybody wants to jump in. And I am very, very pleased to have Andres share with you his amazing story that links the matrix and your how you learn. I can't wait.
Yes.
All right, Andres, let's dive in.
Well, it's fun. Yes. Let's start with the matrix. This is what I generally refer to as the matrix syndrome. And what's that all about? I think that this movie resonates with most of you, and if it doesn't, I'll tell you a little bit more about it. There's a scene where Neo, the main character, he's supposed to be the one that's going to save the world, and so on, is connected to a way of learning, and there he is sitting in some sort of a chair with something sticking in his neck. And through that interface, he gets all of the knowledge that he needs. He can go for 10 hours in a row, and through that, he gets all of the supposed knowledge that he needs in terms of martial arts to just be able to fight the evil of the world and so on. We were stuck for a while, I think, and I've seen this happening in different regions and with different people, with that idea that Now, just because we're in the 21st century, 2022, for most of us, or at least the ones that are as old as I am, this is part of how we thought of the future. This is quick. Knowledge is transferred quickly and easily into our brains, and this is how we consume content. We can find today different ways of consuming that content, whether it is a slider on Instagram or a live on LinkedIn or some event like this one. We tend to assume that just by attending, sitting here, being spectators, now we know about something. And that is not different in the case of design. So, what does that make to our minds? It brings some sort of an illusion, right? This just by attending, I am ready to play my part, do put on my designer suit, and be ready to jump into the world and create some amazing stuff. The immediate next scene or the immediate line in that story of the Matrix, the camera shifts from focusing on Neo and now focuses on Morpheus, who's some sort of a mentor, as we all are. And immediately the sentences show me. And that puts a little bit of a questioning to Neo's ability to do the stuff that he now thinks he's ready to do. And that brings us to some sort of a sparring place where, well, I don't know how to put it in nice words, but Morpheus does win over Neo, right? And Neo is kind of ashamed about that. But and one of the things that he's constantly reminding him is, do it again, try and win over me. And that insistence is part of what, at times during our mentorship sessions, I don't see enough of. I don't see enough of that sparring. I don't see enough of that training. And even if that's that, we still believe that by attending too many courses, seminars, master classes, we're ready. And that plays a trick of, well, if I took this many courses and I'm now ready as I believe I am, why am I not getting the job that I want? Why am I not being recognized as I would assume that I need to be recognized? And that starts to lead to this idea that begins to form in our brains, like, when am I effectively going to be ready? How do I get my first job? How do I excel in the position that I'm at? How do I make it? Let's say I'm a UX designer or just plain designer, whatever ramification of the practice it is. How do I become a more senior designer? When am I ready? Well, this should take very little time. Like in a year, I should be ready for my next step. And then after that, in the following year, I should be ready to become a principal. And how quick is that, right? And where does that ladder finish? How do we make it so that this works on behalf of us and not against us? Well, one of the things that we can start doing is just talking about it, finding mentors, doing more practice exercises, building our way through that, and do not get disappointed with ourselves. I know I have a minute left, but although this is something that I've heard too many times, in one of the cases, it was really extreme. There was a lady, very young lady, 20 years old, that had taken at least 6 or 7 trainings and courses. She thought she was ready. She was applying to multiple jobs. He couldn't get one. and she was running short on money. She needed to get back to live with her ex mother-in-law, and when she got rejected by like the 10th or 12th time, we had a conversation 15 minutes after that, and she effectively told me 2 months after, when she had gotten her job, if you were not have been there in during those 15 minutes after, I would probably have killed myself. So how do we make it so that we don't get to that stage? And this is where the matrix syndrome and mental health get together. I'll turn it over to you folks, and you'll surely make more with this.
Right, Robert, you want to
Oh,
jump in? I think you have a lot to say here.
yeah. So thank you for sharing that story, Andreas. I think, like as you noticed with the panelists, we're kind of picking up on different topics that kind of all come to fruition. So as Andreas was saying on how your self inner critic, or your burden, as you would, comes to the surface, how typically would it show up? So there's a lot of different ways in which it can show up. But the most important is how you can identify and recognize it. So I'll let the other panelists speak to how we can start to deal with it. But in a lot of ways, I always kind of give the joke that no manager or no other person can give me worse feedback than the person in my head. So that's like always the number one thing. So really what I just wanted to share with you all today was the fact that your inner critic never goes away, unfortunately. I think even after so many years in the field, your inner critic can take many forms. But one of the best things about being somebody in this field, and a designer especially, is that you're always trying to improve your learnings. You're always trying to make sure you kind of stay on top of your skills, but your inner critic can always show up. It was in like 2016 that I was moving into more of a leadership position. So I had more of responsibilities of just myself and others' work on me. And I took a lot of self-pride in that. And so what happened was even things like creating a project schedule kept me up at like 3 a.m, where I took enough sleeping pills to like put down a horse. but for me, it only heightened my anxiety, right? So my self-critic was telling me, if this schedule is not good enough for you, it's not good enough for the other 3 people, and it just spiraled, right? So it's at that point that I started to notice that the inner critic was showing up. And very similar to how people start to recognize things is when they recognize when their inner critic is kind of creeping up on them. So I know Theo is about to speak to kind of like what that actually looks like, but I think once you kind of go through it so many different times, it becomes easier and easier to recognize. And so before, I would just let it run, I would just let it go, and things would just spiral. I didn't know how to be proactive about it, but what helped me was just starting to recognize when my inner critic was starting to show. And at that point, that's when I could figure out ways to recognize it, to address it, and start to deal with it in more proactive ways so I wouldn't go down a spinning spiral. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Theo, who's going to kind of talk about some of the things in which has helped him in particular. But what I really like about Andreas is, obviously this can impact a lot of people in so many different ways. Step one is just recognizing it when it happens. That could be sometimes the hardest step, but also the most rewarding. So I'll end there and pass it on to Theo.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, so recognizing the signs, right? We all work hard. We all want to be successful, right? But sometimes we put a lot on ourselves, right? And we always want the best, seeking this perfectionism thing, right? I'm going to talk about a couple of stories about my life, right? And hopefully this sheds well with everybody. And then, leading on to action items, right? Understanding these signs and, getting help, right? So leading to, obviously depression and anxiety, right? Huge, a lot of people have this, and some people are afraid to talk about it, right? For a long time, this is back when I was getting my master's degree. I had to go through college, did a lot of work. I sacrificed a lot. I was had a professional staff position with a bowling company, had to give that up for my academic work. My mother, stage 3 leukemia, cancer, bone marrow transplant, bless my heart. Was going through that during college. I was a mess. I was a hot mess, dude. Moving, trying to find a job after college. It was a disaster for me for many years. I kind of sheltered myself, didn't talk to anybody, didn't get the help, and I realized I was going to bed. I was, before I go to sleep, I'd be like, oh my God, I look at the ceiling and I'd be like, I can't sleep. Mind be racing constantly. I'm like, this isn't fair. I'd be pushing my friends away. I'd be like, you're acting different, Theo. Are you okay? Right. And this is just in general, right? I'm speaking about for you in general, right? Recognizing these signs is super important, right? And kind of moving forward, right? Like action items. What did I do to get over something like this? I leaned on my friends and family, right? I really took a moment to recognize these signs, right? It's really important that you get the help that you need, right? And not be afraid to talk to somebody, if you have problems, inner problems, just about anything in life. And then going to the gym, working out, right? Even though I was super packed, I knew working the adrenaline rush, going to the gym, working them endorphins really helped me boost my energy and my mood, right? It helped me kind of move a little bit further in my career. And then, again, looking forward to the future, right? Now is now, right? You finish your degree, right? Maybe you might be in a UX boot camp. You might be getting some mentoring. You might be having a tough time finding a job, but you will get there. Just believe in yourself and never give up. And don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it. Never let anybody tell you that. So moving into imposter syndrome, right? So, when I was just graduated college, right, I see people with these huge titles, these crazy degrees and everything. And I'm like, oh man, this guy works at Google. This guy works at Facebook at the time, right? I'm like, man, I want to be that guy. I didn't have a big network, right? People have all these connections. And then, it felt like it took a mountain, to get to that level of success. I'm like, man, never going to get there. I went to a state school, SUNY Oswego, got guys from RIT, got guys from MIT. What am I going to do, man? And I said, you know what? That's not going to stop me. No way. No way. Got the help I needed. Got mentoring, through Paul Derby. Bless my heart. Guy is amazing. Chance Zuckerberg Initiative. Best mentor I ever had. The guy taught me how to be someone strong. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional right now, but
shows that this stuff is coming from your heart, that it's the real deal.
Yeah. So like with imposter syndrome, right, is like, understanding where you are in your career, right? And that is super important, right? Because everybody starts somewhere and you have to work yourself towards success, right? And you have to push yourself a little bit. And there's going to be days where it's tough. There's going to be days where you're like, oh my gosh, this is really hard. Hey, you can do it, man. Don't let anybody tell you you can't. And then, of course, using more self-talk, positive self-talk techniques, right? Because when I was in that negative state, I was like, oh, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do that. Oh, comparing myself to others. No bueno. We don't want that, right? No, not good, right? We want to be able to say, okay, Theo, wake up in the morning, drink your coffee, go to the gym. I got this. I'm going to be able to tackle this day and go through this, right? Nothing's going to stop me. Some days it's going to be really hard for you to do that. And, again, I took action, and I didn't worry about what others had to say about myself and my career. Posted on LinkedIn, move forward. And that's the thing, right? Just building your network and connections, right? And just trying to do what's best for yourself and looking out for yourself. And that goes kind of what Robert said, right? It's like understanding your science and being able to kind of work through that and become successful and, believe in yourself. Never give up hope, So, yeah, that's my speak. Sorry. Yeah, I got a little emotional there because I had a rough patch myself, but I wanted to share that story with everybody and let you guys all know that you can do it. Nobody is stopping you. Okay. Joanne, beautiful. You're on.
Yeah. Thanks, Theo. That's so inspiring. And So I guess for me, my story is, it's more about like work related stuff. How do you handle like all different like requests, or how do you handle all those burnout? So why I'm talking about this is start with like actually, last year. So I was in a training, like design leadership training called RIRE Design Leadership Training, sponsored by Google. And when you talk about leadership, maybe you don't think about like the mental wellness. Actually, this is a very big topic there as well. And the way that we learn about mental wellness in leadership is like you have to set up boundaries. Why? Why boundaries important? First, it actually can prevent mental breakdown or burnout, so you can keep a good mental wellness. And especially for a lot of like female or underrepresented talents, like people of color, different gender, different like religions. A lot of people, they tend to actually they maybe say yes to a lot of the tasks, so sometimes they don't know like how to navigate those requests, and that actually impact their work. I mean, I have the story that exactly kind of like falling into that like kind of like a trap, because at one time I was kind of realizing myself like working all nights, weekends, just to get work done, and I feel so stressful, and I couldn't sleep. Like when I get to bed and just thinking about work and then think about tasks, and eventually it's actually counterproductive and impact the quality of my work, right? And I just say yes to every request and say yes to everything, like, and don't know how to kind of set boundaries, to set my priorities. So there's a lot of things I need to learn to navigate like the work-life requests. And speak of boundaries, so actually there are different type of boundaries. There are like, for example, like intellectual worth boundaries. Like there are also like the personal life boundaries. There are also like a health boundaries. There's like financial boundaries. So actually there are different variety of different boundaries. And what I learned about boundaries, like different people have different expectations. Their definition of boundaries is different. And that's why I want to talk about this, like how to set up boundaries to maintain a good mental wellness. There's like a framework that I learned. It's called FISCO. It's really first to define your boundaries, meaning you have to communicate, like when you recognize the signs, like you are not comfortable with some situation, or you feel very stressful, or you couldn't sleep well. Those are things that bothers you. You may need to talk about that things and define your boundaries. And it means that maybe you need to talk with your coworkers, your managers. It's almost a way about like the way of working. So in my company, director, we have been doing a great job in terms of like really helping each colleague to kind of build really a good relationship by kind of like having a way to defining our own ways of working. Everyone has a different work schedule, have a different work life, right? So you need to kind of like talk about, okay, maybe I can only have like 5 meetings per day, and then my mind will get blow up. So maybe that's just my situation. Other people maybe they're fine. So it's okay to talk about this with your, maybe start with your friends, define your boundaries, right? And when you define your boundary, you also need to think about what's the benefits of others respecting your boundary, right? Another way, why do they care about your boundaries, right? Of course, it's good for you to be more productive in your work, right? The other part is like, if my boundaries is respected, then maybe I can help on this and this and this. So you need to think about like the strategy on kind of like communicating that boundaries. You don't need to kind of like being kind of a rude or just say no to everything I don't like. So there's a very tricky situation you need to kind of like consider, because I have been talking to a lot of designers, including leaders like directors, VPs, and the things like people don't want to lose opportunities. Sometimes you don't want to kind of like be seen as the person that don't want to kind of like be excellent on everything, and so you don't want to kind of like say no to other requests or other meetings. But sometimes eventually maybe that is not good for your mental wellness or your health or your quality of work, right? Being able to define your boundaries and also like explain why it's matter, like why it's good for others as well. And those is a great techniques, kind of like helping you to navigate the work-life request. And after you kind of defining your boundaries and then communicate like the benefits for you and also for your work, your colleagues, and then you kind of like also need to build a squad. When I mean squad, it's more about okay, you're not the only one doing this, right? We are all human. We all have different needs. Like after work, we have a family to take care of. We have like someone to care for, or we have our own personal goals, right? And how you can actually get more support. So the way that I learned over the years, like if you want to run faster, you may want to run alone. But if you want to run longer, you may want to run together. Meaning like, you may need to want to have like some friends at work, have a circle that can support you. At least like when you have like some like stressful moment or burnout, you can have someone to talk to, right? To kind of like ask about like their experiences, and then like to talk about like your needs and the solutions. So having like a circle in work or also in life is very important to maintain a good mental wellness, right? And also like when we say boundaries, like sometimes it doesn't mean that like we have to really like close ourselves, like or like don't interact with others or don't talk with others. It's more about okay, hi, I have this needs that I want to kind of like communicate that needs, and I learn how to use the strategy to talk about that needs. But at the same time, having friends to support you as well, and then like you can kind of like always like have someone to advise you and grow together. And I think I haven't shared a lot of things like about what I learned in the training. The other part I remember is principle of charity. That is actually what my current company, like Rector, is kind of like promoting. Like it's kind of like a working culture, right? What is principle of charity? I'm just introduce that is it's like to kind of like assume good intent when you hear something like disturbing you or like are surprising or like that's just one small tricks.
There's so many things, and I can tell you're so passionate about this. There's so many ways that we can identify what it is that our boundaries, our current situation, and I'm just going to jump in here just so that we can keep on track. Our inner critic is so insistent, and there's no way that you can remove your inner critic. It's a defense mechanism that we learned as a child to help us navigate social situations. And we are we need that part of us. That tells us where the edge of our boundaries are, like what Joanne was saying. It tells us what we feel comfortable doing and what we don't. It reminds us that those things that we want, like what Andres was saying with matrix syndrome, that I know Kung Fu, I should be able to do this. It tells us that's what we desire. But the important thing to remember about your inner critic is that it comes from fear. Your inner critic is the voice of fear. And when it gets down to it, you have to be able to notice, like what Rob was saying, you have to be able to notice what's happening in your mind. And if you're speaking to yourself in such a way that if you spoke to your best friend the way you spoke to yourself, would you still be friends? If not, it's time to reevaluate how you speak to yourself. If you say, well, I'm not any good at this and I'm never going to get a job, well, you know what? Your brain is listening. Your brain is really sneaky that way. It does listen. So noticing is always the first step. Notice what it is you're telling yourself. Notice what it is that you actually desire. Get those thoughts up off of autopilot and onto intentional thought and in intentional behavior, and you will move away from fear and move towards love. Now, you need to be loving of yourself, and that includes self-care, that includes getting enough sleep. When you recognize, like, what we all have touched on, that, when you're not getting enough sleep, that's a really good sign that you could be stressed out. Stop, slow down, take a moment, really notice what's happening in your mind. What are you thinking? How are you behaving? How are you self-care? How are you self-caring? And you can't notice what you can't see. So noticing these things is always a first step. And then start asking yourself, what is it that I really want? And what is really in the way? Is it a lack of belief, like what Theo was saying? But if you really believe, then you're going to lead with curiosity, and you're going to find ways to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish, instead of saying, well, I can't, or I'll never, I'm not blank enough, which is the voice of your inner critic. I'm not good enough. I'm not experienced enough. I'm not old enough. I'm not young enough. We then say, well, how might I get this job? How might I get this experience? How might I create a project that doesn't exist just to get experience? So when you're in this moment of stress, pause and start being an empathetic witness to your own thoughts and behaviors. And that's always the first step. So I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A. I want to be able for all of us to address, and you can ask these questions. I think Sandeep is going to help us with questions. Who you'd like to address the question to, or just to the group in general? Is there something that's been weighing heavy on you that perhaps we didn't address when it comes to overcoming your inner critic, or general mental health issues? We'd like to open it up to you at this point. Ooh, thank you, Lewis. How do you balance between mental health and your career journeys? Any of our speakers like to address that? I can jump in if not.
I can say a couple things.
Go for it.
Yeah. So kind of going through, like, just for example, right, my UX career, right, and like understanding where I'm at. There was times where like when I first got my first UX job, like my bigger job, right, it was like at Meyer. I was doing UX research, right, and of course I kind of slightly still had a little bit of that imposter syndrome going, right, and how I was able to balance that and get through it. Well, like I mentioned earlier, right, understanding the signs. I actually got therapy. I had therapy for a very long time. Very, very helpful. Yeah, and then the reflection, right? Like Cam, you were just talking about the rephrasing statements. Super helpful. That's really important. And then again, I know this might sound crazy, but going to the gym really helped me out too. I mean, it just, I have a little more energy, right? Pumping some weights every day. It makes you feel a little bit better. And then, being able to kind of squeeze that in, right? But make sure that everything you're doing, you still give yourself a little bit of time to yourself, right? Hang out with your family, your friends, go play some video games, go walk near the lake or the beach or wherever you live, right? Just try to enjoy yourself, but still be able to accomplish things throughout the day at work. And just leave some time for yourself. Be kind to yourself. That's what I say.
Theo, I love the fact that you touched on exercise, because it is the single most effective, underprescribed antidepressant on the planet. I'll say that again. Yeah. It's the single most underprescribed, effective antidepressant on the planet. So exercise is great. I'm so glad you touched on that. And self-care. All right. Any other questions? I'm sure there are more. What do you think should be non-negotiable during the day to help mental health? Oh, lots of things. Who would like to chime in on that one?
I don't know if it's a cop-out answer, but yourself.
Yeah.
I say that meaning, like, if you find that you're burnt out, or you are reaching a mental block break, or just something, even if you're confused with how you're feeling or what you're thinking, the most obvious and most important thing is listening to your body. So whether that's sleep deprivation, or in Theo's example, having enough physical activity in terms of like getting out and just moving. So that would be mine, I would say, over the years, non-negotiable. So like, stress would impact me in many different ways depending on, the circumstances. But at the very end of the day, the most obvious thing that I was able to kind of like recognize outside of like the critic was like, how am I feeling? If something's not right or something's kind of quirky, step away. It could be like 30 minutes or it could be the next day. Like whatever it means for you. Obviously, everybody's circumstances are very particular. But non-negotiables is ignoring how your body it feels, because then that's a telling sign. So
oh my gosh, yes. And if you don't put yourself first, then no one else is going to do it for you. And everything else in your life will suffer, from your loved ones, how you can care for them, to your paying work, which is the next circle out, to your community and your volunteer work, which is the next circle out. If your well is empty, everything else will suffer. But if you take care of yourself first, everything else will benefit. You have a greater capacity for all those things.
The last remaining thought is that if you're not an advocate for yourself, nobody else will be. So,
exactly.
I'm not saying you don't have a support system, but it all starts with yourself. And so just put it out there.
Awesome. All right. I think we have time for one last question. When things go south, how to convince and keep yourself motivated? Great question. Who would like to address that one?
There's so many ways to address this question, but I'll share a little bit of a perspective. Maybe it's not a direct answer, but we'll get there. We've all been through a pandemic, and we've all switched, or maybe not all, but many of us have switched from going to the office and working at home. At some point during those 2 years and something, I was feeling like, hey, I'm missing something, and I cannot tell what it is. I'm not feeling that well. And I tended to understand that most of what I was feeling was related to my inability to go to the office again, right? But then I started going out for walks aside of the river, and then I noticed a few things. Is what was I missing about going to the office? Well, the 30-minute commute. What does the 30-minute commute mean to me? Being in touch with nature. What else? Having enough time for me to listen to a podcast that I like, or just listen to music that I enjoy. How else does that reflect in my overall well-being? Well, I was a little bit more trained, and now I had time for myself and got refreshed and was not jumping immediately to my phone, checking on my email and seeing what else was I going to do, and how did that compare to go to the office? Well, in fact, that gave me exactly what I was missing of going to the office. Did I need to go to the office again? Maybe not. Do I still enjoy it? Yes, I do. Do I believe that we should all go to the office? No. There's ways in which we can get the same just by prioritizing ourselves, our needs, and being honest with our time, and our focus, our efforts, and how do they render in front of us.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Great answer. Well, I think we are just about out of time. Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to you who have come and listened to our opinions. I invite you to go within, because the answers that you're looking for are most likely within you. And if you have more issues, reach out to your ADP list mentors and to your family. Spend time with people who love you. Spend time outside and in nature, and spend time with yourself inside. I think that's about it for me. Anyone else want to add anything?
Thank you, Cammi. This was great.
This was.
Thank you all.
You guys got this. Just keep working hard.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Cammi.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Awesome. ADP List is such a great resource, is it not?
Wait, hold on. That's it?
No, we're still live.
Oh, I was gonna say this is pretty fluid from like this and anyway. Out
Should we
credits.
have
Out credits.
shouldn't
Yeah.
we have like a virtual
Real-
happy hour? You know.
This would be awesome. Well, the whole self-care triangle involves what you were talking about, the physical, which is eating well, sleeping well, moving your body. Mental, are you learning new things? Are you mixing it up? Are you talking to yourself kindly? Spending time with people who love you, spending time in stillness and exploring your inner world, expressing yourself creatively, expressing yourself emotionally. And I'm so glad that Theo got to tap into some of those emotions. Those emotions don't go away. They're physical and they need to be expressed. And when we can spend time on all 6 areas of our inner self-care, everything else in your life will benefit. Everything else, I guarantee it. Been there, done that, burned out and unhappy and all that. And it all can be, you can bump yourself off of that former trajectory, even by 1 degree, just by breathing, just by going out, just by getting a good night's sleep. All of those things. All right. Thank you, Sandeep, for minding the chat for us and being our tech guide. Thank you, ADP List and Felix and James and all the entire team. Now I know how many people are behind the scenes. Bravo. 9,000 plus mentors. Woo!
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again.
Yep.